Welcome to MOBE Mondays.
Good evening. My name is Yvette Moyo, and I am the founder of MOBE, Marketing Opportunities in Business and Entertainment. It is a series created for opportunities for deal making and collaborations. It's also an educational platform. We call it Advanced Marketing conference series that we started many years ago, over 20 years ago, and relaunched it in recent years. Based on our track record, and that people were still contacting us to say, I just did a MOBE deal, meaning that they met someone at MOBE, and through our encouragement to look at the people right next to you rather than somebody on a podium, to see what kinds of collaborations could take place to move yourselves faster. Whether those were corporate professionals looking to accomplish a goal within corporations, entertainment companies, or Fortune 500 corporations, or whether those were independent entrepreneurs looking to make a name for themselves or to prove their standard of excellence. And so over those years, we generated over $200 million in deals between people who met each other at MOBE. And so in our relaunch just a few years ago, we had some magnificent conferences, very successful. And I must say that our sponsors tonight, AARP and P&G, were there with us. But of course, due to COVID, due to this coronavirus and our sheltering in, we could no longer continue with our annual conferences. So immediately, instead of having an April conference, we started April 20th with a series of these MOBE Monday sessions. And they've been extremely popular and so successful that we even have some MOBE Tuesday specials, which we'll have tomorrow when there is an urgent, pressing topic that requires our attention. And so that is what MOBE is about. For those of you who have never visited or been our guest before, and we welcome you. We sincerely welcome you to this conversation this evening. I am actually have given you the background on MOBE, and I'm going to introduce you to our host for tonight's conversation, which is a very exciting conversation, very dear to my heart. But you know, when you meet this lady, she's fantastic, and I'm just going to give you a little background. I could never have enough time to tell you of the accomplishments that Connie Evans has made on behalf of small businesses, women-owned businesses, etc. So Connie Evans is the president and chief executive officer of the Association for Enterprise Opportunity. You'll know that as AEO. It's a national trade association for micro businesses representing over 1,700 practitioners and advocates in the United States. Connie is a visionary leader, a strategist, and social entrepreneur. In 1986, she founded the Women's Self-Employment Project, the first largest urban micro business development organization in the United States. She also pioneered the creation of the individual development accounts, one of the first matched savings programs in the country. An international development consultant with over 25 years of experience, Connie has worked with the World Bank, several presidential administrations, and a host of local government, private, independent sector organizations. And she's made historic achievements, including becoming the first African-American woman to be elected to the board of the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. We know her as the sister that made it happen for small businesses in the Harold Washington administration. And she also served on the CDFI advisory board and as a member of several delegations to the United Nations. I could go on, but she is an international winner and also for micro businesses, the smallest of businesses, an advocate that you would not believe. She has lectured in numerous universities and frequently speaks at conferences around the globe and has earned many distinguished awards. Tonight, I am so excited to introduce you to our host for this very important topic, Ms. Connie Evans.
Well, good evening, everyone. And thank you, Yvette, for that very generous bio and description. It is so awesome to join you in MOBE Mondays. Congratulations, Yvette, and all of the entrepreneurs in MOBE who are making deals happen. We often don't do that for one another. And so it is a particular honor to be with you this evening and acting as your MC or your host. I want to start by making sure everyone knows right now from the get off who our panelists are. And if I were to read their bios, we really wouldn't have any time else to do. They are amazing entrepreneurs representing really the two very different approaches to entrepreneurship. You will note that this evening's title is Entrepreneurship in All Shapes. And we're going to bring you at least a couple of those shapes this evening. So turning to Aliyyah, let's go with women first here. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, good evening. My name is Aliyyah Baylor, CEO of Make My Cake Bake Shop. We're a small batch bakery with 2 locations currently in Harlem on the Upper West Side and in Central Harlem, and another one soon to come. And our businesses is specializing in, I'm sorry, I want to make sure you can hear me. We specialize in Southern cakes that have been passed down from my grandmother.
Thank you, Aliyyah. And we were just speaking before we came on air that many of us on this panel is hungry. So thinking about her wonderful bakery, it's like, oh, it's getting to us already. Mr. Winston, please tell us about yourself.
Good evening, MOBE Monday. My name is Winston Burns, and I'm the co-owner of Newburns Management Group in Westwind News. My wife, Wendy, and I have been in the airport retail travel convenience business for the last 22 years. I'm a former executive with MCA Records, Sony Music, Warner Brothers Records, and I fortunately got the opportunity through my networking from my college, Morehouse College, to be introduced to the airport retail business. And we were fortunate to win a contract, and we've grown substantially since 1997. And I'm happy to be here with this illustrious panel.
Great, thank you. And Yvette, just tell us a little bit about your background beyond MOBE. Just a little description.
Beyond MOBE, I started door-to-door selling ads and listings for a Black business, Black Pages. It was called the Black Book. And it was Black-owned businesses and a way to get business to Black-owned businesses. And I was extremely good at it and created a national magazine through my marketing activities called Dollars and Cents Magazine that competed on a level with Black Enterprise. And after, by age 33, I was ready to do my own thing. And at age 66 now, I have a business, 32 years old, a couple of brands, a brand is 30 years old, one is 28, and it's about the pivot.
That is awesome. We really are going to explore entrepreneurship in all shapes. But before we do that and turn it back to our speakers, I want to share with the audience a little about the landscape of Black-owned business in America. If we can have the first slide, and this is pre-COVID. So let's look at what, business ownership in America looked like prior to COVID. And then we'll take another quick look in COVID. So what we know is that there were 2.5 million, over 2.5 million businesses in Black business ownership in America. Now, what we know about that 2.5 is a really interesting story. And it's one that may make you cry and may make you holler and celebrate yay. The yay is, that's a lot of businesses, over 2.54 million, almost 2.6 million businesses in the country, Black-owned businesses in the country. 96% of those businesses are sole proprietors. And so it's like, okay, we need to figure out how we can grow more. Only 4% of Black-owned businesses have employees, yet 1/5 of all Black workers actually work for a Black-owned business. So when Black businesses are able to get the resources they need, we know they grow, and that means they hire. And so we just need to get that up a bit. But there's also a big variation between women-owned Black businesses and male Black-owned businesses. Women-owned businesses tend to be sole proprietors more so than their male colleagues. The number of employment of those women entrepreneurs who have employer firms, not only are their numbers in terms of employment lower, but on the male-female divide, women entrepreneurs who are sole proprietors are really challenged in terms of generating revenues that are able to help them really propel themselves and their family to their full potential in business. Now, we know that in addition to the we won't even begin on this page to actually talk about the differences in Black-owned and white-owned companies, except for one little piece, which is so important, and that is that issue of job creation. I'm going to harp on job creation for this one more added second, because, like I said, Black business owners are more likely to hire Black employees. And so as we try to get our hands around the reasons for entrepreneurship being so important in our community, not only do we produce wealth, but we produce jobs. And when we produce those jobs, we use those jobs to hire from our own communities. Let's quickly go to what COVID looks like now in terms of its impact on Black-owned businesses. What we know is that when I talked about those businesses and how many businesses there are, we know that early on, in between February and April in particular, 41% of Black-owned businesses had to close. Now, we're hoping that some of those businesses have returned and some still may be closed, but still plan to return. But we lost 41% of those businesses that had to just stop activity. We also know that there is a huge wealth gap between Blacks and whites. In this situation, we know that the wealth gap is reaching growing to about $290 billion. That just represents the gap. Work that AEO has done has shown if we were to only just look at the credit gap, that's like a $52 billion gap in terms of people seeking credit to start businesses. One other piece I want to say about the wealth gap, and it puts in context, again, the importance of conversations like this, is about wealth. In our research at AEO, what we know is that although the average white family holds about 13% of wealth, that to compare to Black families, it's again 13 points higher. When we compare Black business owner families to white business owner families, that gap or that discrepancy drops to 3%. 13% on average, down to 3%, all because of Black business ownership. So again, if we really want to begin to close this $290 billion growing wealth gap, we have to figure out ways to start, support, and help grow Black-owned businesses. Just quickly, the other piece that I'll mention here, again, you can read some of this on your own, but the other fact that I'll mention, everybody I think who's an entrepreneur has heard of the Payroll Protection Program, the famous PPP. And what we know is, again, in this current environment, an additional amount between $7.6 billion and $15.4 billion in liquidity for Black-owned businesses between 2020 and 2021. If we had just that amount, which represents only 3% of the $659 billion authorized under the PPP program, we would have contributed to help preserve 460,000 to 815,000 jobs in our communities. We need to approach this work, our conversations in policy, our activism, everything we do from a lens of equity. If the payroll protection program had an equity lens in how it was developed and how it was distributed and carried out, we would be in so much better position than we find ourselves now. I'm going to leave that for now and turn to our guests to talk about actually a lot more promising strategies that they've used to actually build very, very successful businesses and are closing that wealth gap in terms of how they are having a winning strategy for business ownership for their community, their families, and their employees. So with that, Aliyyah, please begin to tell us more about your winning strategy. You're what I called, you use a strategy that is more organic. It started from what you knew how to do in your kitchen, in your home, and it went all from there. Talk to us about your winning strategy using an organic business ownership strategy.
The approach of organic, I like that. I mean, I've always called it more of a classic way of doing things because my grandmother encouraged my mother to start a business when I was young. And grew that business in the house, decorating cakes to friends and family. And naturally, what happens is that your business back in the 70s and 80s was strictly word of mouth. And that's the organic part about the business growing. I was her apprentice very young, and in my teenage years would assist her. And once I became in charge of the business, in my mid-20s, I started to see what I can do next. So here I am, the third generation. And my goal and my duty, my responsibility was to take the business to the next level. So we've already been in the household since 1975. In 1995, I took the leap of faith and pursued looking for a storefront within my community of Harlem, and was fortunate enough to find a storefront that was affordable, and broker a deal to be able to be there for close to about 10 years. And my age of doing that, I was, 25, 26. It was not the easiest thing to do, but with the support of my parents, that was the strength that I needed to be able to have that encouragement to continue to pursue what normally was, I was being detoured to work for someone else as opposed to work for myself.
That's excellent. You know, when you what a legacy. I mean, that's what we're talking about in terms of legacy building, generation after generation. I also love what you said about support. Not all of us are going to have, parents that they can turn to, but building support for your business. You just saw me say that most of these businesses, Black-owned businesses, end up being sole proprietors. And it's impossible, even though that means you're the only one there, it's impossible to run a business just by yourself. And so that piece around support, and again, the intergenerational piece of your story, I think are both two pieces I want to extract for people to hear and really hold up about what was some of the winning pieces in your strategy. So thank you for sharing that. So Winston, again, I think about, you coming out, you had a very successful professional career. And again, through support by networking, something that, again, our research shows that we don't all feel comfortable to do. We don't reach out. We find partnering, somewhat challenging. But you were able, through some networks, to be in the right place, to meet the right people, and be prepared to actually use that for your winning strategy. Tell us more about how you were able to do that.
Okay, thank you. People have often said about me, I've never met a stranger. So in my career, in my music career, I finished college, I was in banking, I always loved music, and I was able to network and communicate my way into the music business. And one of the things that my mentor always taught me, he said that, in the music industry, we literally make an intangible a tangible, meaning that we find some young lady in a choir, somebody singing on a street corner. And through marketing, through networking, through communication, through the right production, baby face of Prince, you got to get the right person to make the music. But the point is, once that music is made, then it's my job to make it a reality, to make it a tangible. So I learned how to network. I learned how to make something that no one knew about, to make it a reality, to make a person a star. And once I saw that I could do that, then it dawned on me I could do that for myself. I'm married for 2 years. I got an introduction to the airport retail business through Morehouse, through my roommate in college. So he asked me to essentially introduce this multi-million-dollar corporation to the city of New Orleans. So I knew I could do it because I had the networking ability. And literally, I knew that my wife was a very, very, very good retailer. So I decided that I was going to use all of my energies and everything that I learned in the music industry to network my wife to be able to be one of the companies or one of the people that they selected to own gift shops in the airport. And thank God we were able to make that happen. But I would say that to sum everything up, I decided that I was going to bet on me and make my intangible tangible.
I love it. Thanks for sharing that. What I was thinking about listening to you were taking what came to mind was like harmony and music. And, not only when I think about putting, great music together, you brought harmony. Harmony means that we're mixing and bringing different pieces and adding all of our assets. And I love it because that's what it sounds like you did. Not only did you get centered, you recognize what assets you had and how to turn, what skills and things you had into assets. And then you brought all of those assets together, the wife, the college roommate, the new contacts. And so I think, again, it's a genius and it's part of a real winning strategy when we're able to not only bet on ourselves, but recognize the assets in our orbit and bring them together to kind of create the right harmony. And so it's a great story. Before we go to Yvette to talk about her winning strategy, I'm actually going to use this next piece of conversation to kind of hear what the challenges have been. Again, I keep going back to our research. It's a piece of what we do that we think is important in terms of informing, politicians and others, including business owners and those who are trying to help you about what the challenges really are. And so in our research at AEO, we found that there are there are lots of challenges, but there are three particular barriers that we find that keep Black-owned businesses from really, moving forward often. That is the lack of starting wealth. We know that, I talked about our net worth. And so we have less wealth to start our businesses than our white counterparts. The other gap we found was the credit gap. So there's a lack of starting wealth or a wealth gap. There's a credit gap, and I think we all understand what that looks like. When we go to banks, we get turned down. If we get a loan, it's less than what we ask for. And we have a hard time because we don't have the wealth in our friends and family to go to actually give us that start out capital that we need. But we found a third gap. And it's interesting listening to you all as you tell your story. I'm curious if you found this gap. But the third gap is what we call a trust gap. And that trust gap keeps us sometimes, it manifests in ways that it keeps us from sharing and opening up, keeping things close to the chest, I think it's called, right? That we don't want to tell people what we're doing and what we're trying to do or ask for help. It also represents a real barrier in our growth. White businesses grow primarily from strategic alliances of some type, partnerships, joint ventures, etc. We tend less to do that. And so when those three barriers come together and are intertwined, they literally act like kryptonite in terms of keeping businesses, Black businesses, from reaching their potential. It doesn't keep us from starting. Black people start more businesses than any other segment, but it keeps us from reaching our potential. Have any of you experienced any of those challenges or the combination of the challenges? And if so, how did you overcome it?
I can answer that. I found that when I started, I stepped out on my own briefly until we opened up the retail shop and my family came back, was part of the team. It was very hard for me to connect with others that was in the same industry that looked like me. And when I would go to conventions, that was a retail bakers association would hold a convention every year. And very few people look like me and very few Black attendees were there. But I would go into these meeting rooms with other bakers, generation businesses, and they would be so inviting and very encouraging and very open about even recipes and what their resources were. And I wanted to take that same information, that same approach that I was experiencing outside, bring that back home, reach out to other bakers. We, to talk about doing co-ops. We can pool our resources so that we can get better deals on sugar, flour, eggs, and those things. And was looking at showing the exact template, but I was getting muted a lot. There was a lot of static. There wasn't a lot of communication. And I said, well, maybe, I'm too new in the business and no one's taking me very serious, but I saw that over the years. So in my next approach, there's just different things that I see with business owners who are starting in their home. And I want to be able to create that, what I was looking to do 20 or so years ago, and do it moving forward, because businesses cannot grow without that connection with other business owners within the industry, because there's too many common concerns. There's too many common things that can get you to the next step. So I am going to incorporate a program in my business next year. It's going to be called Baking for the Future. And it's going to look to reach out to business owners who started out just like my mom and like myself in the home, and get them to a point to being able to have the resources that were blocked or so much when I started, or weren't able to have that that development at a point that I know would have been helpful for me.
That's really great to hear, Leah, because so many people are hesitant to reach out, or even hesitant to just step out there and try to help others. So that's really awesome to hear how you're showing and moving it forward and bringing your excellence to help support other business owners in the area. So I'll look out for Baking for the Future. That's really great. I hope AEO can do anything we can do to help. That would be awesome. Let's do that. Winston, what about you? You've been able to achieve a lot. Have you struggled with any of those barriers?
Absolutely. Early on in our career, as you might know, the airport retail business is not a really easy business to break into. So the trust factor for me is I immediately, just decided that I had to trust in myself. My mentor, a Morehouse man, David Franklin, had advised me that the company, W.H. Smith, that I was pursuing to do business with, was somewhat hesitant that they would pick my wife and I to be the business partners or to allow us to run our own stores. As you know, in our business, city government has to vote on the contract or airport authority. So it's not like you go in and you negotiate with one person. It's a city authority. So you have to first convince a major prime to do business with you. That's your first challenge. And then the second challenge is making sure that you can network with the right people to win the contract. So early on in our career, I was advised that the big company had decided that I had great networking skills. They were impressed with my wife, but they just thought we were really too young. They didn't think that we were mature enough to own and operate our business. So I called the president of the company and reminded him that in 1996, the Olympics were going to be in Atlanta. And he mentioned to me at dinner, maybe 2 or 3 weeks prior to the Olympics, that he needed some help and that, their stores were not going to be finished and they had to really accelerate to be prepared, as they would say, opening door fresh for the 1996 Olympics. So I challenged him and I said, I'd like to volunteer my wife to come and work for you for free. And he was like, well, I'm not going to do that. I'll pay. I said, well, look, this is the trade-off. If she comes to work in Atlanta, then she could, learn more about the airport retail business, and you could critique her and see, because, you mentioned to me you're a little hesitant. 1 month later, he calls me and he says, your wife is one of the best retailers we've ever met. We want to offer her a job to work with us in Atlanta. And I said, Mr. President, that's not what I talked to you about. No, our deal was that you wanted to critique us to see if we were mature enough to own a business. So my point is twofold. One, I had to trust myself and I had to listen to my mentor and follow his advice, because I was somewhat despondent when he told me they're not going to pick you. So I had to really change the dynamics and take control of the situation. So that's pretty much my story.
That's a great story. And, I'm thinking back to what Yvette said, how she described MOBE and MOBE Mondays, that part of it is education. And I know there are a lot of smart business people in our audience, but I do want to capture a couple of things that I think are really important that our two first panelists have talked about. Aliyyah talked about we were talking about the shape of entrepreneurship, and she raised the issue of co-ops. Now, in her conversation, she was talking about, how you can form co-op buying and a number of ways of thinking about how to use co-ops, not only purchasing, but maybe she didn't go there, but maybe labor and different things. So it's another model of thinking about entrepreneurship where you're sharing the challenges, the benefits, and lots of things in terms of co-op model. We also heard mentoring, right? Winston talked about the advice from his mentor and going back to mentoring. We run programs nationally that allow folks to come on and get a mentor who is all over the country, and it's virtual mentoring. And so AEO has that kind of mentoring program. And so when we listen to these stories, one is a mentor. Now, I didn't bother to ask Winston, was his mentor black, white? Because I don't know if it matters. it goes back to that issue of find the right people using the assets in our network to get what we need. But the important part is he had a mentor who was there for him, that he took there and sought the guidance there. Right. I think the other piece that I heard was a major prime and talking about contracting. And so for a lot of businesses, that is definitely a winning strategy, to be able to have the trust to kind of step out there and go find the right prime contractor that you will partner with, where you can get under their wing and work to grow your business. Winston, you were about to say something else, I think.
Yes, I was going to say probably the biggest life lesson and business lesson that I got from my mentor, David Franklin, who was he said, when you go in a meeting, just listen. Just listen. Because 9 out of 10 times you're going there for a learning curve, to learn something. So it taught me, because I'm this driven businessman and I want to go in there and tell everybody what I do and what I know and who I know and da da da. He was like, silence is golden. Go in the meeting and pay attention to everybody's body language, and they can necessarily tell you what they're feeling, because you're trying to get a yes out of them. But if you're always talking, you might miss that yes. You know, the other thing in terms of mentoring, I knew nothing about the airport retail business. He was already in the business. So it was a blessing that I had somebody that showed me the soup to nuts. And I just literally, I was like a sponge. I would call him and talk to him every day for probably a year, and just, pick his brain. And how did you do this? How did you do that? I have a picture. He wrote the first profit and loss out for me, a budget, and I framed it, and I have it right above my desk, because it was basically, he was going into the next phase. If you are fortunate enough to win, this is the way you need to run your business from a financial standpoint. So I would think that I definitely wouldn't be who I am today without a mentor. That's a fact.
You both have given us great illustrations of that trust gap. One that worked, one that didn't, and how you are moving through both of those to help create winning strategies in your business. What about that capital gap? We have a question from Facebook about, capital. How can you share what you were able to do to achieve in terms of addressing this capital gap out there? How did you get ready for capital? Who was there? What was there? What was your strategy? Aliyyah, Winston, go ahead, please.
Well, Leah, ladies first.
Everybody wants to answer that question.
That's right.
Capital, that was part of one of my goals, knowing at the point that I knew I wanted to open up a store. But not even, it was before that. I had developed a way of saving my money that I was making in the house. I would take a portion of my savings per week and put it up. I invested back into the ingredients that I needed moving forward, and anything in between those two, what I decided to save and what I needed to invest back into the business. That was what I needed to budget out for the next amount that I had extra. That was something that took discipline to do, because I was in my 20s. I was 18, going on 19 when I was doing this business full time. When I created a business plan, went to the bank, there was that trust word came in. It was lack of trust that they would take a leap of faith out on me and my business, even though we had a track record in the house. I had really great clients, the Apollo Theater, a lot of record companies. Motown was one of my major clients. So I had references. I mean, I had a really good resume, and that still took me going to family, friends, and then we just did an investor event where we sold very, very small shares, if you want to say, just to get in the door, and just we needed to get that door open. I mean, we had a budget, and this is what the construction costs. So there's no way we can go under that. So if a bank says to you, and you've already did your budget for your build out, you know what your starting capital needs to be when you open up the door, you cannot settle for less than that, because it will just prolong your opening. It will just prolong, and you will feel so worn out that, one, you feel like someone's not believing in you, and they should, because you have a great business to offer the community. But I encourage anyone not to be discouraged, that you have to put your business plan. Back in the 90s, it was 3 places. I would say now 6, and just keep going and keep looking for opportunities, because there, and don't look necessarily at the banks that are in your community. I went down to Chinatown and was like, hey, look at my business plan. Because why not? Because it was to say that someone in there wasn't looking to invest in my community on the long haul. So if not, they would have sought someone else. Who knows? You never know what's on someone else's mind as far as a financial institution, to be able to make that next step as far as an investment.
Yeah. Great story. I mean, you just talked about the idea of discipline. I know, when we're talking about being a business owner, what some of the key pieces of success, having the discipline to follow through, having the discipline to have that plan, recognizing that relationships with banks are important. We know so many Black-owned businesses. Again, there were lots wrong with the PPP program that had nothing to do with, Black folks. But one of the keys on the Black folks side was that we didn't have the banking relationships already established to be able to get in line with PPP early on. And something else you mentioned, Aliyyah, that I think is just so awesome is that you gave shares. You were willing to take some to other people's money, to use that money, but to give up a little ownership or give up a little equity and interest. You saw in that second slide, Blacks hold 5% equity in their business compared to 15% of equity held by whites. And so I think it's important. What we found through our work is that many Black-owned businesses rather not take any investment because they don't want to give up ownership. And the old saying, 100% of nothing, it's like not worth a whole lot. So giving up a little ownership, a little equity in that business to get investors is a really smart move. Kudos for you. So how about you, Winston?
Can
I'm sorry, Aliyyah, 1 second. Aliyyah,
I wanted to add, when it comes down to that's discipline, because someone said to me years ago, don't you want to build your business to sell it? And I was like, why would I do that? But not so much to sell it, but just to be able to have the opportunity to bring someone else in to help my business grow. So be open-minded. Be open-minded when it comes down to that.
Yep. Equity doesn't always mean that the exit will only be a sale. So you're right. Winston.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, I completely agree with Aliyyah. You have to be extremely disciplined and frugal. One of my uncles, who was a businessman, when I was about 20 years old, he said, son, if you could learn to live off of 30% of what you make, you always have some money. You'll never be broke. So I lived with that philosophy. And then when I went on my entrepreneurial challenge, as I mentioned in my earlier comments, that I had to really convince the prime that I was the guy. And one of the challenges with the prime was that, you don't own a business. We don't see you having capital. And quite honestly, it's like $200 a square foot, 200 back, this 20 years ago, it's $250 to $300 a square foot to build these stores out. So do you have $500,000? And I made sure I didn't blink, but I said, so that's what it is. I was real measured, okay? You know, Martin Luther King taught me be real measured. Don't. So,
right.
I had a relationship with the Black Bank, with Liberty Bank, and I went to the president of the bank and I said, I am going to convince the prime to lend me 80%, but I have to come up with 20%. So he was like, well, if you get the business, I'll help you out. So I went back to the president of the company and I told him, not only are we going to win this contract, but I'm going to talk to the decision makers to add 5 years on to the contract when we win it. And the president was like, that'll never happen. I was like, well, trust and believe. So I was fortunate enough to convince the airport authority, because we had a lot of construction to do, to review it and add more time on. And when I added more time on, I knew that was going to be a bigger revenue for the prime. So I went to and I said, you have 5 more years of revenue. The least you can do is lend me the money to build the stores out. Not only did they lend me the 80%, they lent me 95% of the money. So it was, I had to go on a very unconventional, but yet, because at the time I didn't even know how to spell $500,000, but like, this is $1 billion company, and $500,000 is not a lot of money for them, but I had to guarantee results. So here again, I had to trust in myself. And as you know, I learned in the music business, you could find somebody and 5 years later, you could have a Michael Jackson or you could have a Luther Vandross. So I knew if you made all the right moves, then positive things could happen. So from the capital standpoint, you really got to show the banks that you have something. You have a great, like Aliyyah said, a great plan. Go to Chinatown, go wherever, because somebody's willing to invest. People, I had a friend who is very successful. He's Lebanese. He's a very successful businessman, and he taught me a very valuable lesson. He said, honestly, Winston, you're my good friend, but African Americans are too conservative. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? He says, money is a tool to be used. You cannot hoard money. You have to use money to make it work for you. And he said, you can't just make money and just, be afraid to take risks. He said, that's what entrepreneurship is about, taking risks. So there's all sources of capital. Some's good, some's bad. But you just have to, first of all, believe in yourself and convince somebody to believe in you.
That self-confidence is so key. And again, across the board, we really recognize that women often don't have that confidence and report that they don't have the self-confidence that you're exuding right now, and as Aliyyah is also exuding right now. I want to move us to this last maybe segment of the conversation and bring Yvette back in as we talk about, where we find ourselves today in this COVID situation, this COVID environment where many of those businesses that still exist are having to pivot. It's the only way they've been able to stay afloat is to pivot. But, it may be true for all entrepreneurs, but we know it's definitely true for Black entrepreneurs that pre-COVID, throughout their tenure as business owners, they've had to always be nimble and be, pivoting and moving that business plan the way it needed to be. Yvette, tell us about some of your pivots that you've had to make in persevering through entrepreneurship.
Well, there have been many, and one I talked about at the beginning was that we had to not have our MOBE conferences anymore. After 9/11, I was actually in New York, on the streets, down the street from the towers, supposed to have stayed in the towers because the next MOBE conference was going to be at the JW Marriott at the World Trade Center. And coming back from that, we lost money. We bet on New York. We had another conference in New York and we lost a ton of money, even though everybody was rah-rah. We're all about the United States coming back. There was no support for some of the things we did because it was too soon after 9/11. So we had to choose between two brands that we had built, the MOBE brand and the Real Men Cook brand, which we created under our marketing firm. And Real Men Cook was the mission one. It was more important, and it represented Black men. It represented our fathers. It represented people in 13 major cities that we were in, and we felt that that Real Men Cook deserved to live, and that is 31 years old now. One is the perseverance, and that when people see you year after year staying in the game, no matter what, there is a certain amount of level of trust and appreciation, respect. And, I came from a sales background. I really recommend that every entrepreneur, and this COVID, if you have some time, take some sales classes, to read some sales books, and understand that no doesn't mean no, and be willing to take a no. Don't necessarily walk away from everything. Everything is a process. So I'd say that in those three things you said, lack of wealth, which I did not start with wealth. I started coming from a company that I knew I couldn't be married and have a family and travel and do what they wanted me to do. So I better figure out what to do. I maintained relationships, and really, those relationships were able to, in a jam, I was able to think of the examples because I worked for this Black business magazine. There was so many examples of people that had to just do something different. One was that we had a brand out of Real Men Cook, which was a cake mix. And after Katrina, it was sweet potato pound cake mix. We were on the shelves in over 400 stores. And yes, it was delicious. And it was the Real Men Cook sweet potato pound cake mix. And it did very well in the South, by the way. And I say over 400 stores consistently, but at one time we got up to about 2,000 stores. And so Katrina came, and all of our sweet potatoes were from Louisiana. The price of sweet potatoes and our unwillingness to compromise and to go to some kind of fake sweet potato flakes or something meant that for a year and a half or two, maybe even 3, we lost a lot of money staying true to that brand. And it wasn't until my son came in and said, "Stop it. You're not making money. Let it go. You already got Real Men Cook the brand. You don't need Real Men Cook the cake mix." The hard decisions and being able to keep on moving. MOBE was dead for 12 years, but the people kept saying, "I just did a MOBE deal." And so the brand was alive, right? The conferences were dead, but the brand was alive. So it's the spirit, the energy that you put behind things, and to be the being risk adverse to relaunch a brand. Who does that? Who does that? That's Black, right? Relaunch a brand and then be more successful in the relaunch than it was in the beginning with these MOBE Mondays, for example. So the pivot is wonderful. We bought a venue, entertainment venue in Chicago, the Quarry, in 2018. And of course, that venue is you can't do entertainment. It was supper club like. You can't have food inside. And we immediately made it a sustainability site, and we became a food pantry. And now we have a vegan restaurant in there, in one of our rooms, and in the other room, we do a tech center, and we do virtual high quality productions to enhance our community on COVID and health and wellness, et cetera. So we know how to pivot.
We know how to pivot. Those are great stories. And personally, I must endorse the Quarry. I haven't been there with the pivot, but the original Quarry was just absolutely beautiful when I would come to Chicago. And now I'm back here full time. I look forward to getting back to its original mission. But it's something we don't spend enough time on brand and really building brand. When I listen to Winston, that's what comes out to me. He exudes his brand, right? He talks about, him and him being confident and assertive. He has branded him along with branding his companies. And so spending the time to develop, your brand and what that means clearly, I think is another key winning strategy. Aliyyah,
Miss Connie, my brand and my wife. So I am very deliberate about a husband and wife team, because she was clearly the retailer and I was the networker. So one thing I learned is that we master staying in each other's lane. I'm the guy shaking hands, making friends, and she's the one developing the brand of the retail.
I just
Awesome.
commend you.
Great partnership.
I commend you for that, because I also recommend those people that are watching, you have to trust, you have to love. It's not easy to be in partnership in business, but you can go faster. Two can go faster than one. You know, keep your faith straight together, and you will make great things happen and have a wonderful life. Really.
And Miss Yvette, my wife always reminds me that women are a lot smarter than men. She reminds me of that every day.
I thank her. I thank her.
I was going to say, here to your wife. Again, you're proving the point, definitely,
Yeah.
about why you put her up in business. Before we close, Aliyyah, what's been your pivot story? I think you have an amazing pivot story that's going on, that's happening like in real life, in real time right now with the bakery.
Literally real time. I have during COVID, we've been open. We have one of my locations is, the intent was to open up this location with another one simultaneously, but because the other one was a little bit larger, it's taken a little bit longer in the build out. So I was already knee deep in opening up a store in 2000, new store in 2018, and then looking to open up another one in this year. So with COVID, it did slow down the process of opening up in the beginning of the year, as I hoped. But in making that decision of standing, you know, there was plenty of times when I sat there and I said, okay, maybe I just need to stop, pause, not walk away, but just figure out what that pause was. When people were saying they were in quarantine and they were in their house, I was like, I don't get that option right now, because people still love cake and they still want that. And that was essential, which was a blessing, because me not pausing kept me focused on what was the next move. And that next move being another opportunity that was granted to me. And we're going to be opening in a couple of weeks, a location more in Central Harlem.
Wow.
And I'm announcing that here.
Yeah, great.
Not prior. And this is our 25th anniversary. So I have an opportunity to open up a location on 125th Street.
Wow.
It is going to incorporate coffee and tea, as well as an open production. So you'll be seeing us making cakes, and I will be able to launch e-commerce. I'll be able to teach in that space. Everything that I've wanted to do over the years that I wasn't able to. My dream kitchen is in that space, and I have a few toys. I have a donut machine.
Oh.
I'll be making, well, it's not a donut machine, it's a fryer. So I'll be making donuts. And so that's a pivot in the business of introducing new things to the brand.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you mentioned that about brand, because so many people forget about themselves being a brand and their business being a brand.
Excellent. Right.
And you have to be able to know how to make both of them work. And that being said, it's when you start to create your logo and create your website, make sure that there's that bio is continuous about yourself, because you are the one and you're the face of the brand. So your company is thriving off of you, and you all are feeding off of each other. So I'm really excited about this pandemic pivot, because not many people are opening up a business during this time. And I'm going to be an example of what you can do in a moment of what seems to be chaotic.
This is awesome. You all are wonderful, wonderful examples of excellence, of perseverance, of great strategy, and really hard and disciplined work that you stuck to it. I know a lot of people often ask folks, oh, what would you give advice to, so-and-so right now? I'm going to ask you very quickly, in less than like 30 seconds each. If you were to go back, knowing what you know now, and you could go and tell the beginning entrepreneur of yourself some guidance, what one piece of guidance would you give yourself now, just starting out as an entrepreneur? I'll go back to you, Aliyyah.
Take note, keep track of your day-to-day, and you will less likely make repetitive mistakes.
Right.
Great. Winston.
I would say, even though I'm a good networker, to network more, to communicate, and basically be very deliberate in what you want. I mean, because sometimes you get in meetings and you're just happy to be in the meeting, but you have to be very focused on what's the purpose of why of so basically grow your business and just be relentless. That's probably what, because when I had early success, I kind of laid back and I should have kept driving myself. So
Right.
that's what I would tell myself. Keep driving.
Yvette, what would you tell the young Yvette?
I would say you're right on track. Your passion and your over connection and love for Black people, and staying on point with your mission, your history, your mission and purpose. When you have nothing else, you can look back at those ancestors and say, if they made it, so can I. If there can be a Madam C.J. Walker building an empire, I could stay in the game and persevere.
Very awesome. Well, I want, in closing, just to thank the audience for listening and viewing. Thank this amazing panel of entrepreneurs and business success. I wish you all continued business success. And thank you, Yvette and MOBE, for having me. This was a joy and so much fun for me to share in your conversations this evening.
Connie,
right before closing, I'm going to send it back to Yvette to talk about the next week's show.
Okay, well, that'll be Yvonne. And I just want to say to you, Connie, you're a bright light to so many people. And the micro businesses, that's the very, very small businesses that are in their homes doing whatever they have to do right now during COVID, will become wonderful because of your energy, your commitment, and your organization. So thank you very much. And Yvonne is going to tell us about our special MOBE Tuesday segment, and I'll be there tomorrow. Yvonne?
We hope you joined and enjoyed tonight's segment. Tomorrow, for MOBE Tuesday, we'll be discovering the topic about Buried Alive, the diversity, equity, and inclusion myth. This subject was so important that we had to just bring you a special MOBE Tuesday. We're having a candid conversation about the microaggressions and overt discrimination that Black corporate executives have to endure. Controller budgets are slowly taken away, and we'll talk about that. We're going to be with two former corporate executives, Dorinda Walker from Cultural Solutions Group and Alex Gums, Channel Partner Group, to share and break the silence and share their stories with MOBE and Real Men Charities founder Yvette Moyo. For all of the talk about creating an inclusive workplace, the reality in corporate America is quite different. We're having a no-holds-barred conversation about speaking up, the risks and benefits, and how your silence affects the coworkers you left behind. That's it for now. See you tomorrow. Thank you for joining us.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.